Okay, let's go on here. So what do we see in Lust chapter 9 about infant sensitivity to this hidden skeleton of language, of syntax in particular? Kids are sensitive to the linear order of constituent heads in sentences at 2 months. That is, the order of subject and verb, the noun that's the head of the subject, the noun that's the head of the verb, the noun that's, sorry about that, the noun that's the head of the subject, the verb that is the head of the verb phrase predicate. In some, if the child hears them in one particular order, and then the baby is, and the way the research is done, how is this done on a 2-month-old, you might ask yourself? How can anybody know this? Well, the child is presented orally, A-U-R-A-L-L-Y, orally, sentences with noun first, verb second, simple sentences, and then they're presented the verb subject in a the verb subject is flipped in a subsequent presentation, and their rate of sucking is measured, or some other focus of a shift in their attention. So the order of constituent heads, their kids are sensitive to by 2 months. Clause boundaries, 4.5 months. So the boundary between the subject and the verb phrase, they're sensitive to. In complex sentences, like the boy ran down the street and the girl walked up the stairs. Those are two, the independent clauses, right? Connected by a conjunction. Whatever I just said, the boy came in the door and the girl walked up the stairs. The boundary between two clauses, kids are sensitive, babies are sensitive to at 4.5 months. Within these clauses, there are phrases, aren't there? There's the noun phrase subject in each, and the verb phrase predicate. There is the object of the verb and a possible object of the subject, complement. 12 months, kids are sensitive to phrase boundaries. They're sensitive, they use phrase boundaries to help them become sensitive to phoneme changes at the phase boundaries. They're sensitive to the grammatical or ungrammatical use of function words, such as prepositions, conjunctions, determiners, etc., auxiliaries, at 16 months. And what in the very early ages, between 2 and 12 months, what facilitates the children's sensitivity to these boundaries, which these boundaries, again, are boundaries because they reflect, incorporate, they're guided by or driven by the hidden skeleton of language that we are referring to. It's prosodic cues in the language that they mark clause boundaries, phrase boundaries as well. So as I mentioned in term, I think I mentioned a little bit ago in the last recording that babies in different languages cry differently, because the cry, what they're picking up in their cry and what's reflected in the cry is prosodic characteristics of sentences in their language, and they become sensitive to the prosodic characteristic of sentences, sentence production at in utero by 7 months in utero, 7 months gestation. And that influences their cry when they're born going forward. Is that amazing? Yes, it is. So these are points made by Lust in chapter 9. These are things that 2-year-olds are sensitive to, and a little later on, as the sensitivity to syntax develops, even before kids begin to produce syntax, they are sensitive at 2 years to constituent type. So they'll react differently to two nouns connected by a conjunction, that is on the subject side of the sentence, dandelion and roses bloom, as compared to verb verbs connected by a conjunction, fish, swim, and jump. So if they hear the sentence, dandelions and roses bloom at 2 years, and the sentence, fish, swim, and jump, they will have the child will notice the shift. Then, so they're given a series of sentences that have the noun heads of the subject connected by a conjunction, dandelion and roses bloom, dogs and cats jump, pigs and piglets oink, fish swim and jump, cats run and hop. They'll notice the shift. They notice embedding. I want to go. You see that they are sensitive to recur. This is the point. They language has the quality, again, this hidden skeleton has the quality of recursion, meaning you can find ways to join things and go on forever. So you can create a sentence can go on forever by simply adding conjunctions and creating compounds. The boy went up the stairs and the girl went down the chute. The boy went to the store and the girl went to her friend's house. That's a compound. And the ands allow for recursion, that is repetition and continuation of the sentence. If you're following me. Kids so they produce compounds early on. By 2, kids are producing compound sentences. That is, they're using recursion. Embedding, you see evidence that the kids are between 2 and 2.5, kids begin to show examples of embedding. The sentence, I want to go, is a sentence in which there's a noun phrase subject, verb phrase predicate, I want to go. There's want, and within the verb phrase is an infinitive verb phrase complement that's embedded, or it is close to something that could become a sentence that is merged with the verb. By 2.5, or that my did it is a problem a child might have in they're quite pulling together a sentence, but it suggests the effort to embed something in that sentence. Question inversion or transformation, which means activation of that CP complementizer phrase. That too occurs between 2 and 3. And in German, you would expect maybe that prior to prior to learning how a particular language handles noun phrase, subject verb complement order, Noun phrase, subject, verb phrase, predicate with verb and complement. In English, it's subject, verb, complement. That's the basic order. In other languages, particularly in complex sentences, order is more complicated. Well, you would think in the more complicated languages, before kids learn the syntactic order, the order of subject, verb, complement in a complex sentence, for example, that they would produce the fundamental, a universal order, subject, verb, complement. So, for example, in English, again in the complex sentence, you know, the cat walked up the stairs and the dog walked down the stairs. You have subject, cat, verb, walked, predicate, stairs, complement, stairs. In the dog walked up the stairs. The cat walked down the stairs. Subject, cat, verb, walked, stairs, complement, or down the stairs, complement, SVC. It's SVC, SVC, right? You would expect that to be produced naturally, universally, regardless of the way the language handles it. But that is not shown, not borne by the literature. Instead, the child very early on, by between 2 and 3, children do not mess up constituent order. They produce sentences the way their language produces sentences, even complex sentences. So in German, in any in a complex sentence, in the first clause, the verb is verb 2. It doesn't come at the end of the clause. It comes in the middle of the clause, prior, in fact, to the subject. But in the second clause of a complex sentence, the verb comes at the end. It's always final. That's German. So for the subject, you don't need to go to Julie, which is a sentence that has 2 verbs, doesn't it? It has the verb need and the verb go. Well, in English, it's you need, and then that's followed by a verb, the verb showing up after a subject would. You need you to go to Julie. So it's you and then need, SV, and then it's an infinitive. So you don't have the subject of to go pronounced. It's you. So it's still you need, you go, and then the complement is Julie or Jewel. And that comes after the verb, doesn't it? In the second verb phrase, so you have 2 verb phrases here. You have need, and then you have the second one, go to Julie, right? See that? Or Jewel, sorry. And go comes before the complement in each, and after the subject. But in German, that first sentence there, look at it. Then, so you don't need to go to Jewel in German is, forget the then, need you, there's need, and there's the subject after it, need you, you need, and then the complement is a second clause, not to Jewel go. Well, look at where go shows up in the second clause, at the very end. In the first clause, need you before the subject, doesn't it? But in the last clause, after the complement. Well, that's complicated. You would think maybe the kid would say, then need you also go to Jewel or not go to Jewel. But no, given a complex sentence like that, the child between 2 and 3 will reproduce it with the verb in different positions or produce it. produce sentences like that. Could you imagine that? That is, the child is sensitive to the way the language handles constituent order. So what's universal is the hidden skeleton of language, but the child is sensitive at a very early age to how their own personal language that they were born into handles things, including prosodic characteristics of sentences, clause structure of sentences they have sensitivity to through prosody, by the way, again, that seems to be the case. And in their actual production, they show that they are, in fact, their underlying structure, organization of syntax reflects the syntax of the language they're born in. The universal is the skeleton, all the parts, the chunks, but what's learned, what the kids are hypersensitive to at a very early age, from gestation, prior to birth, right through the early years of learning, is the way their own language handles the structure of syntax, if you're picking that up. Lust shows further that children will preserve structure even when they make mistakes. They can't handle the complexity of the sentence, too much memory stress on them. If it's too complex, I just messed this up. They'll still maintain, they'll leave pieces out, but maintain the structure. So if the child is asked to repeat, ask Jabba if the boy who is watching Mickey Mouse is happy. Now that is a complicated sentence, isn't it? Ask Jabba if the boy who is watching Mickey Mouse is happy. That's it, right? That's because it's the boy is happy in that sense, right? And that's a question. That's a directive, right? So here's an example of a child repeating that. And of course, the child is overwhelmed with that kind of a sentence to repeat. So the child simplifies it and simplified it as follows. Is the boy who is watching Mickey Mouse is happy? So he makes kind of a question out of it. But again, he maintains the structure. It's the boy is happy. That's the question. And ask Jabba, he simplifies ask Jabba into a question is. Isn't that interesting? And that's manifested by 4. That's 4. I think the child who's doing this repetition is 4.5. You check the text on that. Is the boy who is watching Mickey Mouse is happy? Isn't that cool? The kid keeps it order. It's not ask Jabba if he's happy. Ask Jabba if the boy, it's the boy is happy is maintained. You see that? That's maintaining structure. And maintaining even the relative clause. The boy who is watching Mickey Mouse is happy. Maintains the relative clause, maintains the subject, the boy who is watching Mickey Mouse, maintains the predicate. Is that cool? That is cool. Just like the German. I find the German example maintaining verb order in the first and second clause of a complex sentence when the verb order shifts. Mind-blowing. Very interesting. So there's great infant toddler sensitivity to syntax, to the underlying skeleton structure of syntax. At the same time, they have a very early sensitivity to the way their own personal language handles the underlying structure. There are 2 things going on. Maintaining the chunks, at the same time understanding, producing and comprehending their language's own way of handling it. Two things at once. We're going to pick up with this in class, and I will be asking you to we'll do some exercises related to this, your final project, and this again, underlying skeleton and how your child handles it in his or her language sample, and maybe deal with bilingualism as well. Okay, that's as far as I'm going in this recording.